me. Interlegal is a law firm with a deep focus in transport, shipping, and international trade. We work for everyone who is engaged in the supply chain, in the transportation process, for shipping companies, for cargo side, for logistic operators, for importers, exporters. So for everyone who's got some legal questions during the transportation process. Recently, we celebrated 25 years anniversary. At the moment, we have our own offices all over the Black Sea. I'm from Ukraine, but Mehmet Dogu, who will be speaking later today, from Istanbul, Turkey. Also, we have in our network of offices Georgia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova. This is the countries on the Black Sea, just for you to remind a little bit. Just a few words that we are coming in Ukraine out from the lockdown, and by the end of May, we expect a few offline events. If we are lucky, first of all, it's going to be Odessa shipping party on May 28, and the conference Grain and Maritime Days in Odessa 2 days before the shipping party. So we still hope to see some of you offline, but during the conference we'll have also an online format for those who cannot attend due to travel restrictions or due to quarantine restrictions. And also in May, we are going to have, together with Maersk, online seminar dedicated to container transportation business in Georgia. The first speaker is John Ollett. The baton I'm passing to John. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will be picking up 1, 2, 3 questions to each speaker, and I will ask questions after each presentation. The floor is yours, John. We cannot hear you.
Sorry, the mute button
that's
is
fine, yeah.
A little bit unpredictable at times. Let's see if I share the correct screen. Excellent. Right, so I'm John Ollett. I'm the deputy editor for the freight publication here at Argus, and I cover the Capesize market. So the presentation that I was going to make here today is on Capesize evolution in 2021. Normal spiel, normal notices. And for those of you who haven't heard of Argus, Argus is one of the world's leading PRAs. We've got a variety of offices across the world. We've got 1,000 staff. Like that. We cover a wide range of commodities, everything from sort of crude oil, gasoline and power, right the way down to the weird and the wonderful things like antimony trioxide and fertilizers, biomass, and of course, the wonderful world of freight. So, right, I thought I'd start us off with basically the Capesize market and how rates have evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. This is quite a nice indication of both the boom and late February, early March through to April. This is right the way up to the 27th, and you can see that again we saw more of a jump on the 27th, and we've actually reached and almost surpassed the level that we saw in 2019, and 2019 in itself was a decade high, I believe. So we've seen very fast acceleration, especially in this so far this quarter. Sorry, especially in the first quarter. Right. So what's helped drive that Capesize movement? The main driver, of course, has been Chinese steel demand and Chinese iron ore imports. So China requires steel to requires iron ore to make steel. Chinese steel production in March rose 15% year on year, which brought it to the second highest month ever. We've also seen that trend continuing with industrial production up 14%, indicating that we might see more demand as things move forward. The reason behind this is that China dealt with the COVID pandemic much more quickly than the Western economies and implemented a massive stimulus package initially back last year, but it continues to stimulate its economy with various measures and infrastructure projects which are helping to drive its steel demand. At the start of the year, for example, Argus forecast that there would be a 50 million ton increase in Chinese steel production in 2021 compared with 2020, which itself would translate to about an 80 million ton increase in iron ore demand and a significant driver of Capesize rates. You can see here right at the on the far right of the graph how rapidly things have accelerated February, March, and here into April. So what has this done to the Capesize market, this increased steel demand? So basically it's helped drive rates from the two main suppliers, and iron ore is obviously the main cargo for Capesize vessels, and Australia and Brazil are both the main suppliers. So here on the left, you can see how quarterly Australian exports have evolved over the last couple of years, and how they've evolved so far in 2021. And you can see that already in this first quarter, we've seen much higher volumes, and I think record volumes coming out of Australia. Port Hedland, for example, has exported a record number of tons of iron ore on a couple of succeeding months as volumes continue to rise. But from our point of view, the more significant market is the Brazilian market. Now, Brazil has actually seen a slight drop year on year, slight drop in 2021 compared to 2019 and 2018, but it is significant gains over the sort of volumes that we saw in 2020. And that is reflected in the fact that we're seeing similar rates now as to some that we saw during 2019. One thing as well to note on the Brazilian graph is that 2019 Q2 production, Q2 exports from Brazil were a lot lower than in 2018. This wasn't driven really by market factors as such, but rather by the Brumadinho dam collapse, which happened towards the end of the first quarter and led to fewer exports during the second quarter. The other thing, of course, to note is that the sort of rates and things that we've seen so far this year in the Capesize market have obviously been very strong, but we still haven't really hit the full stride for iron ore exports that we expect to see in the second, third, and potentially the fourth quarter as well. So what we've seen as a very strong market, a lot of volatility in rates and a lot of momentum, is something that could potentially continue right forward over the next couple of quarters. So just with regards to the Brazilian market as well, China and East Asia took an increasing share of Brazilian exports in 2020 and also in 2021. And this has had a very interesting impact on the Capesize market. So you can see here on the far right of the slide that the percentage market share in 2020 rose from sort of the low 70s up into the low 80s, mid 80s. And this meant that a lot of the Capesize vessels were locked up for much longer periods. You know, a Brazil to China voyage, you're talking about a 90-day round voyage. You know, maximum they're going to do 4 of those a year probably. Whereas on an Australian voyage, it could be, 28 days round. And you know, they go back and forth very, very quickly, and it means that fewer vessels can have more of an impact on the market. Yeah, so East Asia to China is about the furthest destination that you can take iron ore, and China has maintained this during the first quarter of 2021. It's obviously taking slightly less, but it's still taking more than it has done in the sort of the pre-pandemic times. One of the reasons that's been heralded to one of the reasons that's been given for this potentially is that China is increasing its use of more environmentally friendly iron ores. We've seen production shutdowns in Tangshan. A couple of years ago, there was a fairly large-scale production shutdown for a flower show to improve the air quality. And this is sort of a continuing trend in China. And Brazilian material is typically the 65% iron ore content fines, as opposed to the 62% iron ore fines or the 58% fines that you would get from Australia. And this means that when you're using it, it's much more efficient and much more environmentally friendly to use the slightly higher grade material. So we have seen some steel mills in Asia take the higher percentage stuff where possible. Another interesting fact is that so far this quarter, we've also seen Mideast Gulf and Europe and Turkey shares of the market starting to push higher again after 2020, even though overall Brazilian exports are lower. And the impact that we feel Argus has had is to help disperse the Capesize fleet over a wider range. So in previous years, you might see a lot of the spot vessels holding in the Pacific and focusing on the West Australian market, and then only starting to feed through to the Brazilian market where it was necessary, particularly when Brazil had more material locked up in its long-term fleet, long-term chartered fleet. But now we're seeing more vessels in the north, more vessels in the Middle East, and more vessels in both the Pacific and Brazilian markets. And this is helping to generate some short-term volatility when regions are not having access to the same volumes of tonnage. Okay, so on the ton-mile side of things, just again related to Brazil. So if the East Asian market has held its share at the slightly higher level on this bellwether route, then the drop in iron ore exports has not had necessarily the same impact that it might have had in previous years. So in 2020, we saw an example of the much higher East Asian market share impacting the ton-mile growth, and 2020 ton-miles were only slightly lower than 2019 ton-miles, despite a fairly significant drop in overall export volumes. So you can see the black line is overall exports, and then that is ton-miles. Now, the sort of impact that we might potentially see in 2021 will come from Vale, for example, Brazil's largest producer, estimating that it's going to see a 5 to potentially 10% increase in its iron ore production, and also hopefully, from their point of view anyway, the same sort of impact on exports. If East Asia is going to maintain that higher market share, then we will see potentially a much higher, we'll see a lot more capes locked up in that market for a longer period of time. Basically, this higher market share masks any declines in Brazilian total export volumes. So finally, to sort of wrap up the iron ore side of things, and I'm aware that might potentially be starting to run out of time, just an example of what exactly has happened with iron ore prices and why we've seen such massive moves in the Capesize freight rates. And that is basically because the iron ore prices have gone up like a rocket ship. It has been some really impressive movements. I remember a few years ago, people saying that, oh, you know, $120 is the theoretical ceiling for iron ore prices. You know, they'll never break that. And you can't even see $120 in the rearview mirror now. I mean, we're looking at potentially 200. And no necessary sign that it's slowing down. On the left-hand graph, we've got the Argus ICX, which is the price for 62% Fe iron ore. That's typically Rio Tinto BHP grades. And then the gray line is the 65% iron ore, 65% Fe iron ore material delivered into China, which again is typically Vale grade. Often, I think they refer to it as their superfines grade, but that's typically what would be traveling on that longer front haul route. And as you can see here, it's just, particularly in the first quarter of this year, it has accelerated massively. And the impact that this has had is that it's helped to mitigate any impact from the rise in freight rates. So on the right-hand graph here, we've got what percentage of the total iron ore price is taken up by the freight rate. So as you can see here on the far right of the graph, the West Australia, which is the blue line, has actually hovered in and around the sort of 4.5% to 5% to 5.5% mark for much of this quarter, despite very significant gains in the actual rate itself. Because of that rapid acceleration of iron ore. And the same thing for Brazil. Brazil has seen more of an increase, particularly over the last sort of week and a half. I mean, there was talk yesterday of Brazil pricing it up to $30 a ton, which is astronomical compared to what we've seen previously. And at that sort of time, it is taking up more and more of the iron ore price. But I mean, we're still not even up to the sort of percentages that we were seeing in the second half of last year, when it could get up to, you know, almost 20% of the freight cost. And basically this means that, you know, freight movements have to get really, really significant before they start to impact charters' decisions on how they're going to move their material. So that about winds it up for the iron ore side. And on the coal side, which is again a fairly significant cargo for Capesizes, we've seen an overall decline in Australian coal exports recently over the last sort of year and a bit. Partly that comes obviously as coal burning is not as popular as it used to be, but also the diplomatic disagreement, I suppose is the best way of putting it, between China and Australia has led to some rather interesting developments. So Australian shipments of coal to China were traditionally very high. It was the #1 market, but they've dropped to basically zero over the last 4 to 5, almost 6 months. And what that has meant is that Australia has had to diversify where it sends its coal, and China also has had to diversify where it imports its coal from. So Australia is now shipping most of its stuff to India, but they're also shipping, you know, some more stuff to Chile, some more metallurgical coal into Europe, things like that. And that means that the ton miles for Australian coal have not really fluctuated on a major scale. China in return is also then not taking Australian coal, so it's taking more Indonesian coal, and basically it just helps to balance out the ton miles. So the impact has been fairly minor from the coal side of things. But what it has done is it has sort of led to some rather unusual Capesize trades that we wouldn't traditionally see. I mean, the big one that we've seen so far this quarter is South African coal into China. You know, we haven't seen that in any significant volumes for a long, long time, but there's been a lot more of that this year, although it has slowed since. But it just, again, it builds on that dispersion of the Capesize fleet that we were talking about, and this sort of having it much more widely spread, generating much more regional volatility, all of which builds that overall momentum. So China has taken more coal from Eastern Russia, it's taken some from South Africa, it's taken a lot more from Indonesia, and there's even been talk of not necessarily for thermal coal, but for various other materials, Capesize shipments out of India. And on top of this, we've also seen which Mark will discuss in much more detail than me, we've seen some interesting movements in the Panamax market. So we've seen very high rates for Panamaxes, and it's basically helped to create more appetite for Capesizes because the grain trade is just sucking up all of the available Panamaxes. One of my favorite facts has always been it takes 7 kilograms of grain to create 1 kilogram of beef. So as you get more of a meat-based diet in China and across East Asia, you're going to see this sort of very exponential growth in grain required. So as that happens, you start to see some more unusual trades in the Capesize market. We've seen it used very strongly for, say, bauxite, for example, is now becoming increasingly a Capesize cargo. But we've heard some very odd discussions this year from there was talk of potentially grain shipments on a Capesize, which would require a lot of work on the ship to make sure that the hulls were clean enough to move it. We've also seen talk of biomass on a Capesize and various other things that were being considered. Biomass obviously is a commodity that we're seeing more of moving into East Asia. And all of this again leads to sort of a wider disbursement of the Capesize market. It leads to more volatility. And again, it's what's helped drive these rates very strongly during the first quarter of this year and towards the end of last year. So just overall, I mean, if we look at the Capesize pricing trends through the first quarter to conclude, you can see in the left-hand graph how rapidly rates have accelerated. You can see on the light blue line there, getting almost up to $30 a ton on the key Tubarão to Qingdao rate. West Australia, obviously being the shortest route, is the cheapest. But again, you know, it's moved from, at one point it dropped to almost 5. It's now up to about sort of 12.5. And we've seen a lot of growth there. One interesting fact that we have noticed is when you look at a time charter equivalent rate as opposed to a direct time charter rate, West Australia actually has a higher daily rate in some cases, and that is a good indication of the sort of volatility that you've seen. We've seen a lot of fluctuation there. So one, that basically means that you're getting a lot of split between the two basins. A Tubarão to Qingdao rate, for example, will lock your ship up for a lot longer. West Australia, short-term volatility may push it higher, but it's going to be a much shorter voyage. So, you know, just to conclude there, the impact that we'll see from these sorts of things on the Black Sea is basically much higher rates and much more difficult to secure vessels. You know, ships are very much focused on picking up those long range, long front haul cargoes that are going to be high earners for them where they can, and persuading ships to come up either through the Suez or from North Europe is going to be more difficult. One potential driver, of course, is that anything that's shipping Tubarão to Rotterdam or Tubarão into Turkey is going to be struggling to find any other cargoes because Europe is in a fairly severe lockdown and is not looking like it's going to be getting out anytime soon. The UK, where I'm based, is emerging, but you know, we're seeing fairly extended shutdowns everywhere else. So we're going to see things being very tight in the Black Sea. We've seen some rates at sort of 50,000, and there is even talk of 70,000, I think it was the other day. Part of that is also due to there has been some consideration towards war risk premiums. We spoke to a couple of owners the other day that said they were looking into it, and that might also then become a factor moving forward. Now, obviously, it's not all been heavy momentum drivers for the Capesize markets. We are seeing some headwinds. There is a global pandemic, which is obviously causing an awful lot of problems. And as India is such a key consumer at the moment of Australian coal, the situation we have over there at the moment, I mean, it's a complete disaster for the country as a whole from a human perspective, and potentially also from a coal consumption perspective. So things like that could create impacts. And for example, if we see any slowdown in Chinese demand, that again could be a very heavy headwind for the Capesize market to face. But fundamentally, we're looking at one of the most buoyant markets that we've seen for a long time, and that's a basic summation of the Capesize market in this quarter. I'm John Ollett. If anybody wants to contact me, those are my details, and thank you very much. I'll hand back to the administrator.
Thanks, John. Bravo, for your presentation, because it's very straightforward, and I think that the message, the final message, was very clear. We got 2 questions. I will sound both of them, and then we will give a baton to Marc, who is going to continue the market review from his side. John, is there any constant freight correlation of Cape Panamax handy time charter rates versus coasters and smaller tonnage? Because it's okay. That's enough, I think.
I think Mark's probably got a better handle on that question than I do. But from my perspective, obviously, Capesize and Panamaxes could create a ceiling for each other as going downwards, but relating right down into the coaster market. Not from what I've seen. I'm sure, Mark, you've got a better handle on that than I do.
Okay. Okay, Mark.
Thanks, John. That's great. Pass that on.
Have fun.
Great escape. A quick answer: no idea. And the reason is the coastal market is very opaque. There's very little visibility about freight rates there, and it's near impossible to look at the correlations between larger vessels and the ships. Within the ships that we cover, so 10,000 deadweight tons and over, and I suspect that's the same for John, there is still some firm level of correlation between Handysize to Panamax, but the connection to Capesize has all but disappeared. Oh, no, maybe not disappeared, that's a bit of a strong word, but it's collapsed. Where 4 or 5 years ago, if you knew your Capesize rate, you knew your Panamax and Supermax rate. Today, that is clearly not the case. We have seen in the last 2-3 years, at the beginning of the year in Q1, Capesize were significantly below freight rates for smaller ships. It was the case again this time, except this was not in a terrible market. This has been in a great market, and yet Capesize rates were below that of smaller ships. So the correlation is pretty much gone, and I would, for Capesize against the rest of the ships, and I would say this is essentially due to something John alluded to earlier, which is the specialization to a large extent of Capesize vessels. I think they are transporting about 80-85% of their cargo being iron ore. The coal section of it tends to be slowly but surely shrinking. There's bauxite now that's made a big entry, but funny enough, bauxite is much less into Panamax now. So it's become a specialization over 2, maybe 3 commodities, and that means that they are specialized ships, and they rely essentially on that. And that also explains partly the volatility in the Capesize market. When you have only one leg to rely upon, when that leg disappears, you will go down pretty quickly.
Thank you, Mark. There's also a question about, John, about Argus. Does Argus provide smaller tonnage rates indications for Black and Med Sea regions?
We do provide some Black Sea scrap assessments, I believe, and also potentially some steel ones for those publications, but that's not an area I'm involved in at the moment, but I believe we do. I would have to check. If anyone wants to email me or call me, I'm happy to chase up that information and
yes,
get back to them.
I think the presentations will be distributed. You will see an email of John, so please feel free to ask John about their publications and their business. Thank you, John. And Mark, please turn on.
Right, bear with me. I'm not too familiar with this system, so let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, seems to work. Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
All right. Okay. Right. So as mentioned, I'm going to look at smaller vessel sizes, and whereas John was looking at larger sizes, I will touch again a little bit on iron ore and a bit on coal, not in the context of Capesize vessels, but more towards smaller ships. So let's look back first of all at what's been happening in recent months. And I think it's very important for us to understand the market going forward, to try and get a grasp of what just happened. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have all the answers. I have strong indicators, strong pointers, but there are a number of things moving in the background, and it's difficult to have all the answers. So we've seen freight rates for vessels from Handysize to Panamax, Capesize, go up significantly in Q1 and remain very high in Q2. We're talking about a market where a Handysize vessel was earning more at some point in Q1 than the Capesize vessel, and comfortably more. That's the sort of levels we hadn't seen over a decade. So it's led a number of people to think, well, ask themselves, is this the renewal? Is it dry bulk coming back to the fore? Is it the super cycle and everything? Well, let's have a look at this. First of all, ton-mile has not played a significant role in the surge in the freight rates. John did mention the political spats between China and Australia that has led to redistribution of all the trade routes for coal. That's true, but it hasn't impacted on overall the demand from that perspective, because the switches between countries, importers and exporters, has balanced itself off. Ton-mile index was very firm at the end of last year, as it often is. And by the way, I'm seeing month written in Danish. Apologies for that, but doesn't really matter, does it? So yes, ton-mile index did grow significantly in the fourth quarter last year, as it normally does, and it collapsed at the beginning of this year, as it normally does. So not really a key indicator here. Similarly, the bunker costs have gone up quite a lot in Q1. In January, I think it went up 10% from December, and another 5-10% in February. So firm numbers here. That has to some extent supported rates on spot, but not so much overall. And vessels, if anything, have actually sped up as a consequence of the very strong market trying to maximize the return. So what's led to those very high freight rates for dry bulk? Well, one element of the answer, we think, is some level of decontainerization. The container market has been red hot since last year. We're talking crazy rates. Just to give you an idea, from China West Coast to the US, China to US West Coast, freight rates for a 40-foot containers have gone from $2,500 a year ago to about $10,000 today. Some really ridiculous levels. Not only that, as a consequence, the shipping lines have tried to maximize the return on the head haul and have returned their boxes back to base rather than ship the goods on the back haul from Europe, from the US, from the Atlantic to China or to Asia. That means that there was a shortage of boxes, and that also means that the price of the freight rates for backhaul trays on containers have gone up significantly. Now, the impact that has had is that when a number of shippers of raw commodities that would normally go on containers because they don't necessarily have the volumes for large vessels, or because the economics make more sense for them, those shippers have faced an increase in freight rates that have been ridiculous. And let's keep in mind that commodities that are carried in containers, the value of those commodities is not fluctuating as much as that goes into bulkers. So their overall pressure for them has been to move to another mode of transportation. And at the time, of course, bulks have held because they were cheaper on average per ton. So a number of shippers have moved to the bulk cargo, moved back, you could say. If you exclude iron ore and coal, we have seen a level of containerization of bulk commodities, raw materials, that have come significantly down from last year into Q1, down by about 4 or 5%. That's helped support demand in Q1. Another aspect has been the congestion level globally for dry bulk. That we are looking at a congestion that's about 10% higher in Q1 than it was in Q4. Having said that, between these two factors, which we do feel are important, we don't have the full picture. This is not enough on its own to warrant the freight rates we've had in this market. So the question is, what else? What could have led to this market? John has alluded to it. The value of the commodities has gone up so much that basically the freight cost that we are seeing in market is almost irrelevant. And of course, a chartering manager will always ask, for lower freight rates. Oh, that's a bit expensive. Fair enough. That's their job. The fact is, shippers, buyers of the commodities have wanted to bring their cargoes over as quickly as possible to take advantage of it and take advantage of the high prices they are selling their finished goods at. John did talk about the iron ore costs that indeed have come down from a year ago. But even other commodities on specific trade routes, the percentage, the cost, the cost ratio of freights against the commodity value have remained very low. And it's difficult to qualify and quantify, as a matter of fact, this effect on the overall freight market. But it has, in a sense, removed some sort of cap on all the freight rates markets. What we have seen, we have looked at cargoes, shippers of grains in the US Gulf, and we looked at how quickly they wanted to their cargoes over to them. We took for an indicator the choices of the shippers to move their cargo via Panama, via Suez, or via Good Hope. And we have seen a clear increase in Q4 and Q1 this year in terms of shipments through Panama as shippers want their cargo as quickly as possible. Again, this is not an exact science at this point. This is more about indicators, but we do feel this is the single most significant factor in the overall rates that we've seen this year. Where we go forward from that, we'll get to it later on. Now, as far as pure demand is concerned, we have a number of factors that are significant. I think if we start with the metal and energy, first of all, the stimulus that have been unleashed by China last year, that are about to be unleashed again this year, the new package, but not just China. We also have a number of stimulus packages that are being put together in the US on infrastructure, the infrastructure bill, in India, the NIP's new infrastructure project, and in Europe as well. So we have a number of stimulus that are being put together globally, and all of these will be mostly heading towards infrastructure investment, meaning more demand for steel and construction material. In addition to that, we have in China, for instance, but it's also some sort of a trend globally, we've had a demand for vehicles that has bounced significantly in second half of 2020. In China, it was to a large extent thanks to the waiving of a number of taxes. Those tax waiving have been extended into 2021, but only on electric vehicles. And here is another aspect that is being seen on a global level. Demand for electric vehicles is going up significantly. That will mean, of course, demand for steel, but also a lot of demand for copper, for manganese, for nickel ore, and so on and so forth. And last, as far as coal is concerned, yes, it's we do feel it's a bit of a, I don't want to say dying commodity, but it's a commodity that is clearly under pressure on the global stage. But we do see, and the only push of positive view we have for it is Southeast Asia, where there is still a significant amount of coal power capacity that's being installed. They are looking at doubling their power capacity over the next 10 years. But that, of course, will be to a large extent leveled off with the proximity of Indonesia on their doorstep. Though there will be some cargoes coming in from Australia. These stimulus that I mentioned earlier, together with also at some point some level of shortness in tightness in supply in Brazil, notably at the end of last year, have conjugated to give us the commodity prices we've seen recently. John has focused on the more recent term for the developments of the iron ore value, the commodity value, but you can see here that compared to a year ago, we are miles above. The iron ore prices today are ridiculously high. John mentioned a fictitious top capping that had been in the market for a while. I must admit, I had never seen iron ore prices like this. Moving on, the other aspect of demand at the macro level are essentially on agricultural commodities, ferts, and some other commodities will have some supports as well. We have a year 2021 that is facing probably the record level of grain and oil beans transportation in history. That's first of all on the basis of a global harvest that are significantly high. Furthermore, we have for fertilizer some level of imbalances between markets in terms of the nutrients in the soil, and that will lead to a large level of demand for those cargoes. Not only that, of course, but in China, we also have another couple of factors. One, the African swine fever that has rampaged through the country since 2019 and decimated the pork population. We are now we are now close, not quite at, but close to a return to full head counts in China, which is quite impressive. And that has created, of course, a lot of demand for meals and feedstocks for those animals. And in addition to that, we also have had the phase 1 agreement. Where it goes from here is a question mark, of course, with the new administration in the US, but it looks like they are going to carry on with that agreement. Whether it goes into a phase 2, no, not sure, but the phase 1 agreement has clearly pushed shipping Chinese interest to buy more and more from the US. And in that context, we have seen indeed purchases of US produced by Chinese buyers go up significantly last year already. We had a record corn purchase plan by China last year. We also had soybean purchase that have gone up quite a lot from the last 2 years. And not only that, but if we look on the left-hand side, we see US soybean sales to Chinese interest now in orange for next year, so from September onwards, that have already started firmly. That is extremely early and they're very strong. Not only that, but those volumes are the volumes that have been declared being purchased by Chinese interest. There's also another 2 million tons of cargoes that have been purchased already for next year without declaration of destination. But most of the time, early purchase are done by Chinese interest. So we are facing a market where purchase by Chinese interest of US produce for next year has already started very strongly. Last thing, other commodities such as pet coke or cement. Pet coke is an interesting one in a sense that refinery productivity in the US Gulf, when a large supplier of pet coke for transportation, refineries have been, the utilization has gone down quite significantly since last year, since the outbreak of coronavirus, and remain low today, which means that the availability of the commodity in the US Gulf is very low. And that means the prices have gone up to the extent that Indian cement producers, the single largest consumer of pet coke, have had to look elsewhere for their energy. They have started importing coal from Australia in order to produce their cement, because that happened to become cheaper than the pet coke. And that's actually a trend we've seen, not just between pet coke and coal, but also between the coal of different regions. So going back to the political spat between China and Australia, we have Australian coal today that is cheaper than Indonesian coal. Indonesian coal is lower in calorific value than Australian coal. And that has led, of course, to a conundrum for the Chinese government, because the purchase of coal now for them abroad has made Chinese coal prices extremely expensive. We are looking at a price that's over $150 a ton in the winter, compared to a margin where they're comfortable at, which is around $70, $85 a ton. So that's made cost overall quite expensive. There are question marks, of course, going forward. One of them is the African swine fever I mentioned earlier in China. So whereby it seems China has got it under control now, and the overall headcounts are going back up. There have been some outbreaks in China recently. One question mark, of course, is how much of an outbreak took place, because information on that topic has been sparse, i.e. They have not communicated very much. So what we have is empirical evidence from locals, and it seems to be under control, but there's always the question mark, what if it goes on the rampage again? Second risk I would keep an eye on is the developments of La Nina. We are in the La Nina year. It was declared early this year, and it was very strong in terms of indicators. However, it has not yet really translated into firm impact globally. The only one I know of that is really more than usual was some floods in Eastern Australia. But aside from that, last month, it's been quite mild. But there's always the last effect of the La Nina or El Nino is what happens to the monsoon in India. So that will be a question mark to keep in mind when the monsoon approaches. Normally, La Nina translates into a much stronger, much wetter monsoon in India. Today, the reservoir levels are already quite high, and so it might actually be an excedent level of water in these reservoirs, which would also mean less requirement for coal. But also it could mean a level of flooding in the eastern part of India, where all the coal production takes place. Last aspect, in terms of risk, I'd say there's something to keep an eye on is some possible deleveraging in China. At the moment, we're looking at a country that's unleashing stimulus packages after stimulus packages, albeit slightly smaller every year. But overall, we have a country where the debt has ballooned significantly over the last few years, and the central government is clearly worried about that debt level and the servicing of it. Quick look at the Black Sea before I try and wrap it up. I realize we're quite late. That has translated the recent market into some strong demand from the Black Sea. Black Sea to the eastman, Black Sea to other Black Sea destinations, of course, but other destinations have also taken an increase. We've even seen recently a level of iron ore from the Black Sea going on Panamaxes, increasing quite significantly in the last couple of quarters. That has provided a lot more demand in the area. But of course, agricultural commodities will remain the stalwart of demand in the region. And we are looking here purely at vessels up to Panamax. I'm discounting Capes here. On the supply side, well, we have an order book, first of all, that is really small. We are looking at, between Handysize and Panamaxes, we are looking at 4 to 6% of the existing fleet on order. Now, if we think back a few years, let's say 2016, we had double, not even that far, 2018, we had double digits in terms of the order book to the ratio to the fleet. If we look back to 2009, we had a global dry bulk order book that was 80% of the existing fleet at the time, quite significant. This is not the case today. We have freight rates today that are going through the roof, and we have an order book that is so small. That's actually a good sign ahead of us. We also have demolitions in Handysize and Supermax that have been quite low. It's not been so much the case in Panamax so far. There's a number of reasons for it, but there's potential there because there's quite a number of vessels that are over 20 years old. Anyhow, looks like scheduled deliveries is more towards the short side. And today, if you go to a shipyard and ask for a new vessel, you will struggle to get a slot before 2023. And even there, you will have to compete with other sectors because dry bulk is not the only one that's actually doing very well. I mentioned containers earlier on. We now have Japanese yards that had never built containers before that are proposing container designs to buyers, but they are not extending the number of slots they have to produce the vessels. So there's going to be some competition there. And we've already seen new build vessel cost prices go up quite a lot in the last few months. Just one quick thing. So we have a market here where the China was pretty much carrying the world on its little shoulders for the last couple of years. This is not the case anymore. We now have the rest of the world that's also growing, which is clearly a big plus. that is translating into a demand growth that is faster, that's going faster than supply. On paper, it doesn't look astonishing, and would hardly manage to catch up with the deficit we've built up in the last couple of years. But keep in mind what I said earlier. Commodity values being so high means that the freight cost is almost irrelevant. And that is what has driven the market as far as we can see it. We're looking here at commodity value forecast as provided by the Australian government. Thank you, Australia. They are seeing, except for iron ore maybe, they are looking at commodity values carrying on going strongly throughout the next couple of years. Meaning, if you translate that with what we were, if you compound that with what we were saying earlier, we are looking at a freight market that will be sustained for the next couple of years. If you think it's the containerization, on the other hand, that has supported freight rates for dry bulk, you're also in for a treat. Most people you speak to in the container industry expect the freight rates as they are to carry on into 2022. Maybe not at this so high level we're seeing now, but still very firm. So also another level of support from here. And same with congestions. While we see it going down from what we saw in the first quarter, we still expect it to be quite firm throughout the next couple of years. So here we have a platform for freight rates for dry bulk to be very strong, at least for Handysize Panamax over the next couple of years. And that wraps it up for me. Hello?
Marc, thank you very much. You were very emotional, and really thank you, John and Marc, because it's always for me not a surprise anymore, but always good to see that despite the Black Sea is in the middle of nowhere due to nature of cargoes, and it's always good to see that we are a part of the global market. And you explained that very good. One question, Marc. Where can we see your indices, your prognosis on a regular basis? Of course, we are going to invite you more often. Probably, it's nice to have you on board of interlegal events, but on a day-to-day basis, where do you put your prognosis?
So we're not a provider of indices. We are brokers, right? So we provide our own freight rates to our clients only. Having said that, come the fourth quarter this year, we are moving to a subscription basis. And at that point, individuals or companies will be able to purchase part of our data and research on a fee basis.
Thank you very much. Good to know, John. Yes. Okay, so we are over with the market review, and now we are coming closer to more operational issues. So we have three other speakers.
I'm sorry, Arthur, I'm having to leave.
Yeah, Marc, we do remember. Thank you very much. Your presentations will be distributed to delegates, and they will have an opportunity to get back to you. Thank you for your input, Marc.
Here's Marc. Thank
you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
The first in the second row will be Mehmet, my partner Mehmet Dogu. Merhaba, Mehmet. He's going to speak about salvage issues in Turkey due to the monopoly in the Marmara Sea, in the Bosphorus Strait. It's always a challenge, let's say. Then we will have Nikos Marmatsouris with his observations over Black Sea ports. Probably he will disclose some life hacks for ship owners. And by the end, we will have a case story, three cases from Interlegal team on the disputes, usual disputes, and in the Black Sea region. Mehmet, it's your floor. Please light the fire.
Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Good to see you, Nikos, by the way. Well, you said that John and Mark were very emotional, so I don't know what we need to do with myself and Nikos after that. But anyway, Nikos says that he's going to cry. Well, let me connect my share screen.
Yeah. Mark and John, they are from northern countries. We are southern people. So of course, I'm expecting you to be emotional as always.
Okay, thank you. I presume my slideshow has appeared on the screen. Can I have a confirmation?
No, it doesn't. We can't see it.
You can't see it. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet.
What about now?
Now, okay.
Now, okay. Very good. All right. So, my obviously topic is the salvage in the Turkish waters. That's just a view from Bosphorus. This is the network of our offices, but it might emphasize especially the countries which actually Mark and John were speaking about, the commodity trades. So you can see that all these countries have exit and obviously any access to these countries from Turkish straits. I would like to start with a little bit of history of the salvage in the streets. That it might surprise many of you that Lloyd's open form originates from the salvage cases in Turkish waters in the late 19th century. The Secretary of Lloyd's, Sir Henry Hosier, in 1890 responded to the shipping industry with the concerns about the attitude of the salvos in the Turkish straits. Later on, Lloyd's succeeded to persuade the salvos in the region that there should be a system whereby the lump sum agreed salvage remuneration should be subject to some sort of arbitration. And finally, the first draft, the first version of LOF, Lloyd's Open Form, was drafted, and that draft was approved by Lloyd's Agency Commission on 1891. The present legislation in Turkey, first of all, the salvage services in the Turkish territorial waters can be performed by Turkish companies. There might be a possibility of subcontracting some foreign tugs, etc., but mainly because of the code of cabotage, the legislation says that it can be only done by Turkish companies. Now, on top, this monopoly area is showing the monopoly of the General Directorate of the Coastal Safety Administration in Turkey. This is especially the entrance of, over here you can see the entrance of Bosphorus, this is the Black Sea area, the complete Marmara Sea, and this is Dardanelles, the outer limits of Dardanelles, is a monopoly area, meaning in case there is a need for salvage services to be rendered, it can only be done by the Coastal Safety Administration with their own tags and etc. There might be a small question here that can any sister ship salvage can be performed? Not really. Even if you do that, compensation is requested by the Coastal Safety Administration due to the monopoly. This is as well showing the total distance of Turkish Straits, the VTS area, the Marmara section, Gelibolu section. You can see from the Black Sea entrance, mostly this route is used by all ships having a passage. I just added these two few photos on the a very sharp turn, showing a very sharp turn at Yeniköy in Bosphorus, that how risky it could be. Like this is kind of, I think it's about 250 meters length vessel, if I'm correct, is having nearly a 90-degree turn during the passage at Bosphorus. And this is the narrowest bend, like that 270 meters tanker is having about a 45-degree turn in the narrowest point, which is about, you can say that double of its length. 698 meters is from shore to shore distance itself. One or two interesting photos from the past. This is an old one, but it's an interesting one. That's why I put. This is in 1979 motor tanker Independenta with having a collision with a vessel called Shipbroker, and I just actually dealt with the wreck removal of this. And this is Nasya, sorry, the other one was Elvira. This is Nasya having collision with Shipbroker. The one at the left was Nasya, which was towed to Black Sea open offshore for the extinguishing of the fire. And the other one completely burned, and it just stuck next to the restaurants. These are some of the major ones. This occurred recently, 2018. Most of you probably know. They just stuck a nice historical house at the shore of Bosphorus. And this is Songaridium, which sometimes comes quite close by. The state salvors, I'm going to highlight their service because of the monopoly. Otherwise, in Turkish territorial waters, any private company, salvage company, can provide salvage services, obviously. Need to be a Turkish company. However, in that monopoly area I have mentioned, the services are provided by the Coastal Safety Administration. Their main work is roughly, can be said, search and rescue in case of distressed situations. They obviously provide salvage, towage, and escorting the vessels having a passage like above certain tonnage to have escorting tug is compulsory. And they do the VTS, the traffic services. They control the traffic in Bosphorus from northbound passages or for southbound passages. It is being controlled by the traffic control, which is under the management of the coastal safety, obviously the lighthouses and etc. VTS being under the same management with the salvage company results sometimes interesting cases. At the end of my presentation, I will just touch that subject a little bit. So either you do it with in Turkish waters, you do it with private companies or with the state-owned, this monopoly company. You may do it in two ways. Either salvage services are performed without a contract. Any contract is not signed, then it is bind to the Turkish Commercial Court, which is in connection with the International Salvage Convention 1989, or if a contract is signed, although I stated here when the Turks 2015, this is the contract, the name of the contract, no cure, no pay contract used by the Turkish state salvos In other particular cases, when the services are provided by private companies in the territorial waters, Lloyd's Open Form, etc., can be signed. But when you work with the state salvage administration, you need to sign their contract. Do you need to sign their contract? Let us come to that point again later on. It's just an example of the first page, because it's a 4-page contract. I thought it was unnecessary because of the limited time, but I will go from the main articles to give a rough idea, which is quite similar to a Lloyd's Open Form, but nevertheless, the contents of the Turks 2015 is unfortunately only, well, mostly to the favor of the state salvos. Article 1 says no cure, no pay. That is classic. And then Article 2 and 3 gives the full control and discretion to the salvos. Like they can start anytime, they can decide that no more salvage services are required anymore. It's at their discretion. And they have the operational rights. Article 3, Article 4, the cooperation of master and crew is needed. It's impossible for masters to intervene, even it is reasonable. This is very important. And obviously, during these salvage operations, the salvors are using the ship, their stores, their equipment, etc. Let's say there has been a fruitful result finally, and the salvos in that case, of course, you can sit and make an amicable settlement meetings. I will also speak about that, but mostly if you want to take your vessel and your cargo away, securities and guarantees are involved. They just need a cash security or a bank guarantee from a recognized bank for vessel, cargo, freight, and bunkers. Obviously, it's very much seen in the practice in every salvage operation everywhere, all around the world. A right of lien and detention of the vessel now until security and the guarantee is provided. From the legislation point of view, the state salvos or any salvos in Turkey have a right of lien on the property salved, and they can detain the vessel in this respect until security is provided. Article 6 touches a little bit kind of a scopic clause. Mostly it is mentioning about preventing environmental damages, but it also contains that even if there is no fruitful result for the services they provided, they're going to take kind of minimal costs for bringing their equipment, etc., to the site. Arbitration, I always found this very funny, personally. Now, within the contract, it says that if the parties cannot settle the matter amicably, it goes to arbitration. When it goes to arbitration, the arbitrators need to decide within 90 days. It is written in the contract, and plus, arbitrators' fees will be 12% of the award. So you should never expect probably that arbitrators try to be reasonable in certain aspects. My suggestion would be obviously to settle the case amicably before it goes to arbitration. I mean, I've done it before, so also the Coastal Safety Administration is happy to settle matters amicably before it reaches arbitration. To avoid arbitration, obviously, you shouldn't sign the contract itself. I will talk about it very quickly. The salvo's additional expectations, bread and butter, I said there, because let's say they left their pier and trying to reach for a salvage case to a vessel, but that vessel, for some reason, by her own means, is refloated, or there's no more need for salvage services to be rendered by the Coastal Safety Administration, but they still would like to have some bunkers, etc. Though this is obviously connected if the contract is signed, otherwise they will have no such a right. And loss of income claim by salvors is mostly done with, let's say something happens to your vessel, you ground somewhere, and then you send your sister vessel, which was passing nearby, to assist your own vessels. Both vessels belong to you. Nevertheless, they still, because of the monopoly, are entitled to claim their loss of income in such a case. The payment of the award, if the case goes to the arbitrators and arbitrators reach a decision and decide on an award, it should be paid in 30 days upon notification. VTS getting involved. These headings, I just wanted to give a little bit of an opinion to the participants. VTS is controlling the traffic, but under the same management of the Salvage Administration or Coastal Safety Administration. So what happens in practice, obviously a ship having a kind of a rudder failure or some engine breakdown immediately advises the situation to VTS, and VTS immediately tells the salvage department so that they can immediately attend to the vessel. I had some personal experiences myself. Like ship is being drifted due to an engine breakdown. I speak with the ship owners and I tell them to just drop anchor. Because if you drop anchor, it will not be salvage, it will be a kind of towage. But the VTS is telling me not to drop anchor, etc. But VTS always will tell that not to drop anchor. Finally, you can pay a little bit of fines instead of 500,000 US dollars salvage award. So the involvement of VTS is always to the favor of the Salvage Administration. If I had also another case that in that particular case there was a lighthouse failure. The vessel had grounded because of that lighthouse failure, and the Salvage Administration have provided some salvage services. They were entitled to receive some money. They received salvage award, but then I sued the Salvage Administration and recovered that money back because as VTS, lighthouse service is also under the same management. So in that case, it helped us a lot. We use this connection to our favor. Obviously, the lighthouse services claim can also be explained as a tort of salvo. So when the salvos can give some damage or kind of loss due tort, it is possible to sue them for your losses. Amicable settlement negotiations, even the salvage, State Salvage Administration prefers that because it always brings a quick settlement. It can be like the ship interests can have a separate settlement and the cargo interests can have a separate settlement. Having said that, obviously, by signing the contract, the State Salvage Administration is taking a one party as an opposition, which is the ship interest, and they say that you are responsible for the bunkers, for the cargo and everything. But in practice, obviously, different lawyers are appointed on behalf of each party. So you can take your own appointment for the negotiations and have your deal, and which is in practice done separately. So I think this is the end of my presentation. I think 15 minutes is, well, 15 minutes, yes, roughly done. And if there are any questions, I'll happily try to respond.
Mehmet, there are two questions. Thank you very much for your contribution. The first of all, it seems that amicable settlement is always a better option. But it seems that it's a kind of, let's say, Eastern courtesy, or so everybody in Turkey, I mean, Turkish sellers, they are all delighted to have a friendly, amicable settlement. So the general advice would be not just to follow the invoices or amounts. So how to start amicable settlement with Turkish sellers?
Very good question. In fact, I was going to speak about this, but probably I missed it. Now you made the subject. Very good. First of all, the salvage services are provided under certain conditions. It might be a very emergency one. There is no time to sign a contract. They come and give the service. This is a good position from my understanding point of view. It's a very good question for the owners, because the tugboat tows the vessel to an anchorage area and stays standby, and mostly the master of the tugboat insists the master of the ship should sign the contract. When they are my clients, I say, no, don't sign anything, because you will not bind yourself with arbitration or any other conditions of the state salvos. And the case, if you can't settle anything amicably, the case will end up in the court, not in arbitration, which mostly the state salvos don't like the situation, and they even settle the case quicker. Obviously, they aim to get some percentage, their usual percentage they have in mind. They have got their own statistics, and being a state company, they need to obviously report on certain times to their executives, etc. But mostly it's floating, depending on the case and depending on the services rendered. Is a heavy grounding or just a kind of like a vessel without engine being drifted and it's just being towed to anchorage area. It might differ from the point of services provided, but it should be around 5-6%. If security need to be provided, then that security should be like 15-20% of the south values, but it ends up around 5-6% as an award during the amicable settlement. A little bit maybe higher than the London practice, but because of the monopoly, I mean, everybody is used to it now. I must say, even the insurers, the insurance market in overseas, in London, etc. So, did this answer your question at all? Or,
Yes. Thank you very much, Thea. Yeah, very clear. Thank you very much. The second questions, I can't stop from asking a question about new Istanbul, new Bosphorus channel. It's an ongoing question for many years. But a few weeks ago, there was in the mass media there was an input that the new wave, let's say, real start of this project has been launched. But today, in the very morning, in the mass media by Reuters, I read that some Turkish banks, known banks, due to some environmental compliance regime, they commented that they would hardly invest into this project because of the environmental risks. So, what is the, let's say, update on the new channel in Turkey? How would we comment upon further developments?
So you are asking me a question about this project, about the canal, this
yes,
new
canal. Yes,
man-made canal. Okay, nothing is certain yet. I mean, lots of things are going on media, but nothing is officially announced. Certain parties are interested to do that, but from the legal point of view, obviously there is the agreement of Montreux. And it's not just, I wouldn't say that it's a very simple matter to decide yourself to make you can make a canal, you can pay and make a canal, but on the other hand, you cannot force other countries who have shores in Black Sea to use that canal and pay money because there is the natural passage, which is the Bosphorus and Dardanelles itself. And they are bound with the Montreux Agreement. So this is a kind of a delicate matter because like Suez Canal, like Panama Canal, these are man-made. And if you want to use them, if you don't want to go like Cape Horn or like Magellan underneath South America or Africa, then you use these channels and you pay. Now, it's not the same situation with the Bosphorus and Dardanelles and the new canal aimed this new canal project, because there is already a natural passage exists. So the countries would like to continue to use that, and it will take lots of discussions to finalize this matter. Sometimes it becomes a very current issue, but sometimes no. I think nowadays we have this pandemic. We on 29th, tomorrow, we will be fully locked down until 17th of May. We can't go out, etc. I mean, nobody will allow to go out from their houses. It's complete lockdown. This is, I think, number one issue for the moment for us. But that is that canal. It will take some discussions. It won't be that easy.
It's more about media heating this issue now rather than real developments. I see.
Well, I mean, in fact, the width and the depth of the canal, you know what we, I mean, the shipping have experienced evergreen case. It might easily happen in this new canal because of the width and the depth shown in the plans. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but we will see. I mean, let's wait. Let's wait a bit more. I believe lots of discussions will take place on this.
Mehmet, thank you very much. Now, Nikos Marmatsouris, our old friend from Greece. We are missing you, Nikos, because it's more than 1 year since we have not seen each other around.
Добрый день, дорогие друзья. Я тоже вам скучаю. I miss you too. A good day to all, and very happy to see Mehmet live and kicking, and all the previous speakers actually had a very good presentation. I think, Mehmet, you need to stop sharing your screen.
Yes, I will.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So that it goes back to...
Nikos, please.
Yeah. So I was invited, thank you very much, Interlegal, to speak about some life hacks for ship owners. And it is actually, we live in a world of constant change, and it's very, very hard, not only for the ship owners, but for everybody, to keep track to what is happening around us, into shipping and everything. We have so many new things, regulations, ecological stuff, digitalization. We hear everything, every day we hear some new words that we have to digest and also comply because it becomes regulations. So I will break my my thoughts into two parts: that what ship owners can do and what perhaps cannot do, but they have to follow. And the things they can do is to, first of all, monitor the regulations and follow. For example, when you have sanctions, like you have in Black Sea, in Crimea, if somebody breaks the sanctions and goes into Crimea, then he will have to resort, his vessel will probably be arrested in some other area, and people like Interlegal will be called in to assist, and it will be a very hard case, I'm sure, because I've from a previous seminar that you did, a legal seminar, I got the idea that it's a really hard situation for the ship owner if somebody breaks the sanctions. So comply is a very basic thing to do. And also another thing can do is to be prepared, to have the vessel prepared, because we know that some of the Black Sea ports are more strict than others with regard to port state control. I dare say this is tougher mostly in Russia, and so you have to reach the port well, knowing that your vessel is well prepared and complies and has no major deficiencies, because pardon me, if you have deficiencies which you cannot fix, that's one thing, but if you could have fixed them, then it's better to perhaps buy the spares or buy things missing while transiting in the Bosphorus, for example, where everything is available. Whereas if you reach, for example, Russia, because I'm sticking to Russia because I know that it's a very difficult area to operate, you cannot find the spares, or if you find them, it will take time and it will be extremely expensive. And if you plan to send anything like spares, forget it, because it will take ages to arrive. And so be prepared beforehand. That's the things that the ship owners can do. Things they...
Nikos, pardon, do you have a presentation or you don't, just you speak?
I'm speaking, but I would like to show now on the part 2 is things...
I see, okay.
I'm going to share screen, if I may, to show you a small...
You need to address it to the delegates in order they could, because I see that everybody is trying to click and to find the presentation on the screen.
I have no presentation, but I will show you this. Is that okay? Is it visible to you now?
Yes, sure.
So this is a small video which explains the butterfly effect. Butterfly effect is when something happens in one corner of the world, totally irrelevant, and the chain of reaction affects another area of the world who didn't know or didn't care or didn't even got involved in the first item. So it's a very funny video, very short. It takes a few seconds. Please see. Butterfly. So, a series of events which were not interrelated, but the poor guy lost his roof at the end. And this unfortunately happens today, and it happens almost every day. So we have these geopolitics that keep changing, and we cannot really keep track of them. For example, yesterday's news was countries initially in the Far East area, but is going in the Persian Gulf, but it's going to expand to Europe, I'm sure, and perhaps the Americas. They have stopped since yesterday receiving calls from vessels coming from India, because India has a very huge pandemic situation. So this is something new. We have, for example, people who have flown into Indonesia and they are waiting for the 5-day quarantine to pass, and the vessel came, and because we have India, I think, closed, they are not allowed to board the vessel. And you cannot prepare for such things. So the ship owners just have to follow the news and follow what we also do. There is so the crew changes is a parameter which is currently, because of the COVID case, something very extreme, and we can somehow control in some areas, but something happens in another part of the world which is affecting us, and unfortunately there is nothing we can do. Just sit back and wait for the situation to improve. So the crewing is a very, very important thing. Other things that might be affecting the ship owners are having to do with the fuels. So they have to comply to new fuel regulations and to any other regulations. They had to comply to ballast water. We had the exhausts. Now we will soon have the measurement of the footprint and all this sulfur content, the emissions that the vessel is sending into the air, and that is another thing that the owners have to comply with. Spares logistics, very, very difficult, as I said, in some countries, and much easier in some others. So people can get prepared, do the homework, and send the spares timely to a feasible destination. And what else should I say? Well, shipping agent, which is my job. Well, if everybody is in doubt, call the agent. So that's the thing that people have to remember, that the local agent knows the local rules and regulation, and is the only one who can perhaps predict and protect the ship owners from any hardships, following up what happens to their vessel, and perhaps giving them pre-advice and alerts in case to stop them from doing something wrong, or stop them losing money, basically, because the time counts. So that concludes my quick thoughts on the hacks. It is basically common sense, and we are there to help.
It's a very, very good message about common sense, yes. And I can stop from asking you a question about the Ever Given in the Suez Channel. Of course, a lot of discussions about future consequences, legal liabilities coming out. The ship is already arrested, and there is an appeal about the ship arrest. But in your opinion, how, in the sense of the common sense, how does it influence the market in the Black Sea and in the East Mediterranean?
I believe that the case of Suez Canal is very unique, because we have a very narrow channel, and they had a very big vessel with a huge vessel with no much turning area. And there is a regulation, of course, there is rules and regulations for navigation in the Suez Canal, which stipulate that up to a certain LOA of the vessel and up to a certain wind, for example, 6 Beaufort scale, you are not allowed to transit. And the wind at the time was marginal, perhaps less than what actually pushed the bow of the vessel into the bank. So it was something not predictable, but of course it could have been predicted if they kept the vessel there waiting for 1 day. But the money is huge. You are talking of a $500,000 transit, and the vessel with 18,000 containers loaded who needed to reach the destination, also at a very high rates. As everybody knows, container rates are over the roof, sky high at the moment. So people took a decision to transit the vessel with some risk involved. There is always a risk involved anyway. So for every transit, there is a risk involved. But on that vessel, it was unfortunately big buoyance, big freeboard, a gust of wind, and off she went. And the rest is history. I don't think such a thing can happen in the Black Sea. However, as Mehmet indicated some bad case scenarios which we have already lived in the Bosporus, that could be an area where we could have an accident. That's why the Turkish authorities are taking measures. They have systems in place. When there is a fog, they stop the traffic, for example. They take some safety measures. They are prohibiting vessels exceeding certain LOA to transit because the curve, as Mehmet showed on the picture, is really very steep, and it is difficult, and you have currents, you have all these things. So there is always the unforeseen. We have to be prepared for the unexpected, to prepare for the unexpected, and be ready. There is a lot of disaster readiness around, but not enough, I don't think, because you never know when the next one will come out. I don't know if this answers your question.
Things happen from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. Thank you very much, Nikos. Mehmet, would you like to add anything? Please turn on microphone.
Yeah, sorry. Well, if there is no specific question, I prefer to listen rather than
Okay.
speaking.
Okay.
If there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Okay, clear. Okay. We have a final presentation from Interlegal team. I'm passing the microphone to Alexey Remeslo, and we're going to have a case study or case story by the end of our online seminar. Alexey, please.
Thank you, Nikos.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks, Nikos. Thanks, Mehmet. Nice to see all of you on our webinar, and thank you to our participants for joining us. By the way of introduction, my name is Alexey Remeslo. I'm a partner of Interlegal and the head of the Shipping and International Trade Department. Today, our mainstream of focus will be cross-law cases where the English law meets the local procedural rules and practice. Together with our local offices, we practice English law for our shipping and international trade clients, together with the Ukrainian, Russian, Georgian, Turkey, and Romanian laws. Most of the contracts of our clients governed by the English law, but they have Black Sea region performance. Today, my colleague Mykola Kozachenko will share with you with some regional cases. We hope they will be interesting for you. The first case will be regarding the exercising lien on cargo. In this case, we will share the local practice of Turkey and Ukraine in respect of the exercising the lien on cargo by the ship owner and how the local rules and practice affect on the principles of such right. The second case will be the charterer's interests against the cargo owner's interests. In some cases, the charterer may want to discharge the cargo before the presentation of the bill of ladings. Otherwise, the cargo have to be held on the ship, and the charterer may have to pay extra hire or demurrage. The owners may agree with the charter party to follow the charterer's instructions and to discharge the cargo without the presentation of the regional bill of lading. And this is one of the areas where the charterer's interest and requests may be in direct conflict with the obligations owed by the owner before the holder of the bill of lading. And finally, we will also speak about some geographical and legal issues which frequently arise in the Black Sea region. So enjoy the case study. Mykola is already near me, and thank you. Mykola, please.
Thank you, Alexey, for your kind introduction. Good day, dear colleagues. My name is Mykola Kozachenko. I am a lawyer at Interlegal. This is my pleasure to deliver a brief overview of recent shipping practice in the Black Sea. Today I will focus on some key issues which arise in the Black Sea, especially those ones which fall out of the general accepted practice, which is quite common worldwide. Sorry. I have got some technical issue. Oh, it's all right. The first issue concerns the right of lien on cargo. I believe most of you are well aware of what the lien of cargo is and how important it is in the modern shipping industry. Quite often it appears to be the only available way for the ship owner to secure his rights. I mean, to detain the cargo in its custody until the charterer fulfills its obligations, which are mainly financial. Even though the right of lien seems to be recognized in the Black Sea states, as well as globally, there are some crucial points which shall be brought to your attention in this regard. I will give an example of two our recent cases, one of which was in Turkey and another one in Ukraine, but both of them have identical subject aspects. So the case is that we represented the ship owners who were chartered from one Black Sea port to another. Following the departure from the loading ports, the ship owners were entitled to claim some payments under the charter parties, which had to be settled before breaking bulk. On arrival to discharge port, because the funds had not been received, the owners declared the lien on cargo. So far, so good, but here the local rules stepped in and turned the cases to a different way. The cargo receivers referred to the local courts and claimed to discharge cargo to their custody. The courts accepted such applications with a condition that the receivers would lodge a financial security to the courts. The receivers followed the directions, so the lien on cargo was substituted by the financial security. The first issue in this case is that lien on cargo by its nature is possessory. So it means that an owner can exercise it if it still has possession or control over the cargo which is on board the vessel, or if it is stored in a warehouse that the owner has control over. As soon as the owner releases the cargo to the receiver or any person appointed by the receiver, the owner is no longer able to exercise the lien itself. So it appears that exercising the right of lien, the owner relies on the protection of English law and the contract which is governed by English law. But as soon as the local court decides to release the cargo, the owner is no longer protected by initial remedy and shall rely on the local rules only, which regulates the financial security. And here another issue arises, which is that in cases where the receiver is not a charterer, it appears that the owner has no contractual relationship with the receiver as soon as the charter party is concluded with different party. Thus, in the eyes of the local court, there is no clarity on which merits the owner would claim the receiver to justify his right to the secured amounts. Insofar as the only thing that relates the owner to the receiver is the bill of lading. The owner shall initiate the arbitral proceeding against the receiver on the bill of lading basis only. We understand that when such case is referred to English arbitrations, there is a good practice of accepting such claims, and the award may be in favor of the owner. But the issue is that there may be problems on the stage of recognition and enforcement of such arbitral award because of the absence of clear arbitration clause between the owner and the receiver. Unfortunately, there is no uniform practice in such matters, and the outcome of each particular case depends on the particular judge who considers it. Another matter to be discussed today concerns discharge of the cargo against a letter of indemnity. While the commercial world agrees to use the letters of indemnity to speed up the cargo operations at the discharge port and allow release of cargoes, guaranteeing the owners that they would be indemnified against any liabilities in case of cargo release without presentation of original bill of lading. There have been some local precedents changing the whole routes of such actions. Again, we had two similar cases into the jurisdictions, Turkey and Russia. The background was a bit different, but the outcome and the reasoning was almost identical. The case was quite traditional. A vessel had been loaded in Turkey and proceeded for discharge in Russia. The sales contract was on FOB terms. So the seller collected the bills of lading from the owner and requested payment of the contract price from the buyer. The buyer had partially paid the price, but the debt of around 300,000 remained unpaid. That's why the seller did not send the original bills of lading to the buyer, claiming full payment under the contract. Meantime, as the vessel reached the port of destination, the buyers requested the owner to discharge the cargo against presentation of the letter of indemnity. The seller in turn requested the owners not to do so because the sellers still were unpaid. However, the owner followed the buyer's instructions just because of one simple reason. That was the buyer who was the charterer, and therefore the owner followed his instructions because he didn't have any contract with sellers. The sellers applied for the arrest of ship on the grounds that the owner illegitimately released the cargo to the person who had not got a title over the cargo. The court rejected the application, argued that since the seller was not a charterer and did not have any contractual relationships with the owner, there could have been no commercial dispute between these parties. So it seems that, in fact, the letter of indemnity was not even needed. Theoretically, the owners could simply release the cargo to the buyers without bills of lading, and the unpaid seller would not have any possible remedy to secure his losses. And another case concerns Kerch Strait. Kerch Strait is an interesting place in light of the chartering terms. Today, each vessel stops, each vessel calling to the ports of the Sea of Azov or the ports of the River Don stops at the Kerch Strait, awaiting some formalities or organizational measures in order to proceed through the strait to the Sea of Azov. Especially in winter when ice caravans are being formed for the voyage. This caused some interesting cases where the ship owners tendered the notice of readiness from anchor place in Kerch Strait. In our recent case, this happened again, and the owner claimed that notice of readiness tendered from the Kerch Strait was valid for the purpose of loading port of Mariupol, Ukraine. The point is that there are around 120 nautical miles between Kerch Strait and Mariupol. So this is a general rule that notice of readiness may be deemed valid when three requirements are satisfied. The vessel has arrived at the agreed place and is considered as an arrived ship. The vessel is in fact ready for cargo handling operations, and the respective notice of readiness is tendered to the appropriate person within the contractual terms. In our case, as well as in many others, 4W clause was applied, which the owners relied on, arguing that the term weapon allowed to tender the notice from Kerry Strait. But the term weapon means that even though the vessel is not accurately in the port, but she still shall be within the close proximity to the port, which would provide the charterer an immediate and unrestricted access to all ship cargo spaces. And only then the vessel would be entitled to tender the respective notice of readiness. So unless the vessel has some superpowers to deliver the vessel immediately from Kerry Strait to Mariupol upon the charterer's request, there would be no room for arguing that the valid notice was tendered. Of course, this is subject to some special clauses which are sometimes introduced in the charter parties, which require additional determination of rights and possibilities of the parties. And finally, meantime, there are some good news from Ukraine. There has been a recent precedent in the Ukrainian judicial decisions by which the court allowed lodging a P&I letter of undertaking as a sufficient security, which allowed the vessel, which allegedly had caused some pollution and was ought to be arrested, to leave the port without further detention, while the case on merits had to be decided later. This is good news for all the shipping industry, because this had never happened before, and finally having this one precedent, the whole shipping community in Ukraine hopes that it would simplify the procedures in Ukrainian ports. At this point, I am finishing. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
There is one, Mykola. There is one question as for the case for the story with the bill of lading.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what if seller appears with original bill of lading and demands the cargo? He has title of property as holder of the bill of lading and can claim against the owner for misdelivery of cargo.
Thank you for the question. I believe the first point here to be discussed is what kind of bill of lading it is. So if it is to order bill of lading or any other negotiable kind of bill of lading, then yes, it could be the case. But if, for example, the bill of lading is the named bill of lading, where the consignee is appointed, the seller would not be able to present this and claim a releasing of cargo to himself. So this is subject to some particular points which have to be discovered within preparation to the case.
Yes, and probably it's so in the Black Sea when the voyages are very short, for example, from Ukraine or Russia to Turkey or vice versa, it's always an issue because voyages are very short and sometimes bills of lading are sent by mail. So it's always a matter of investigating the very concrete situation. I think that we are over with question and we are over with our presentations by time. So let me thank every speaker for today: Mark, John, Mehmet, Nikos, Alexey, Nikolai. Thank you very much for your input and introductions. It's been a pleasure to have an online seminar like this. We'll be doing this later this year, I believe not once, but a few times. Please follow Interlegal websites for the news and announcements. And I'm inviting everybody to join us in May for our May events, both online and offline. My name is Artur Nitsevych. Please feel free to ask questions, and very important for us to receive your feedback for this webinar. All presentations and materials will be distributed to all registered delegates, and you will have a chance to give feedback and to see materials when you have enough time. Thank you very much. Ciao. Have a good day.